Sure thing.
So Dr. Linda, thank you so much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership.
Thank you for the invitation. It was one that I was not expecting at all. So I was really honored when you reached out for us to have this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Linda. And it's great to have you on the show. Now, before we walk into the future, can you please tell us a little bit about your background? Where did you grow up?
Sure. So I was born and raised in Bulawayo in Zimbabwe. And I spent the first 25 years of my life there, living with my parents and 4 sisters and a brother. And I moved out of my parents' home the day I got married. So I spent the first 3 decades of my life living in Zimbabwe and then moved to South Africa. And this has been home for the last 20 years. So that's where I grew up, in a home that had a lot of people, a lot of noise, and a lot of love.
Okay. And can you tell us, what was your dream career when you grew up?
So for the first probably 15 years of my life, ever since I could remember as a little girl, my dad told me I wanted to be a medical doctor. So he wanted me to be a medical doctor and was planting into my head that I should be a doctor. And that carried on until I got to high school. And in high school, that's where you start getting exposed to sciences and so on. And I think it was around the 2nd, 3rd year of high school that I said to him, I actually don't want to be a medical doctor. I found that I didn't enjoy the natural sciences and leaned more towards commercial / humanities kind of subjects. So at the age of 15, I then said to him, no, I don't want to be a doctor. I want to be a psychologist. And he didn't know what a psychologist was. So he then pushed back and said, no, you must think of a profession where you'll be able to grow. And after a lot of toing and froing, we eventually settled on the fact that I'd be a lawyer. And then I got to varsity and I'm like, oh, no, I don't think I want to be a lawyer. I'm actually going to be an accountant. And that's how I ended up being an accountant. And he agreed with that because he worked in the private sector. And so he knew what being an accountant meant. But my dream career was to be a psychologist. That's what I really wanted to do, was to study psychology. But because I had a dad who was trying to guide me in the way that he knew, we kind of settled on me being an accountant. But there was a condition, Nick. The condition was that whatever field I went into, I would become a PhD holder. And he held me to that. So up until I graduated, as I went through to the different levels of study, he would be saying, Sissy, when are we starting the PhD? So it helped to have an accountability partner in the form of my dad, because I had made the commitment to him when I was about 15, 16 years old that I would do a PhD, and here we are.
That's great. Well done. And can you tell us, Linda, who inspired you in your early days?
Daddy.
Right.
So I grew up, and I think it's important to understand the home setup that I was raised in. I was raised in a home that had 5 girls and one boy. And we're talking 50 years ago, 50 plus years ago. And the one thing about my dad is that he didn't allow culture and tradition to define how he raised his girls. And as from, my earliest memories are of him saying, as long as you want to study, I will cut off my toes to pay for fees for you to go to school. You must be able to stand on your own 2 feet. You can be anything that you want to be. So I was raised in a home that had no restrictions in terms of what I could be. And I think that really led me to go through life with a never say die attitude, because from the early years, in my formative years, I was raised to believe in myself, to believe that I could be anything that I wanted to be, to believe that I could excel, and that I didn't need to limit my dreams and my thinking to what was around me, but I could think bigger and higher. Yeah, so definitely it was my dad.
And Linda, today you're leading one of the country's and the world's most precious institutions, and that is the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. Now, looking back over your career, would you say there was maybe a turning point where things could have gone different?
No, actually, I think the turning point was when I left the private sector. I was very clear that I wanted to go into an environment where I could make a difference in people's lives. I didn't know what that would look like, but I think I had the clarity that I actually want to make a difference in people's lives. And so, you know, my road to being here wasn't really planned as being, I want to be here and I want to be there and I want to end up at the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. It was really the big goal was it must be in an environment where I can make a difference in the lives of people. And I think my career experiences up to the day that I stepped into the Children's Fund were actually preparing me for the role that I'm currently holding. So the turning point was probably in 2010, 2011, when I left the private sector and made the decision that I really didn't want to be in that environment. I wanted to be an environment where I could actually feel and see the difference that my coming to work made in the lives of people.
So, Linda, what is driving you today? What is getting you out of bed on a Monday morning?
What's driving me right now is, you know, working prior to joining the Children's Fund, I was working still in the development sector, but more looking at youth-focused areas. And when I got to the Children's Fund and started being exposed to the voicelessness of little children, what drives me is being able to create, first of all, a South Africa in which children are treated as human beings with rights, where everybody understands that we are all responsible for children. We are all accountable when things go wrong. And we all have a responsibility of making sure that every child in South Africa has got a fighting chance of enjoying optimum well-being, of being prepared to be a responsible citizen of the world, regardless of where they home background may be. So what really drives me is being able to say we're not doing enough for children. Children are being left behind. Children are being butchered by the adults in South Africa. Children are starving. They're wasting away. South Africa, wake up. We're destroying our future by not investing in children. So that's what makes me do what I do. That's what motivates me to get out of bed at night, in the morning. That's what keeps me awake at night. Just thinking around, okay, this is the latest story. What is it going to take to turn the tide around when it comes to the way children are being treated right now?
Thank you. Now, Linda, I guess it does take leadership in many regards and also on a personal level by everyone. So I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
It means investing in children now and teaching them the values that are going to serve them well when they are now sitting in positions of leadership. What do those values look like? They look like empathy. They look like integrity. Leadership means that you will never, ever do something that you'd be ashamed of if people found you doing it. It means you walk the talk. It means you create what you want to see. So long before you can hold a person accountable for anything in the workplace or in society as a whole, you must be holding yourself up to that same standard. It means teaching people that what matters in life is ensuring that people are treated with dignity and with respect, that we see each other, we hear each other, we carry each other where we need to. And all those things are things that should be inculcated in the home, so that by the time we're sitting with doctor titles and CEO titles, what we're doing in the workplace comes naturally to us, because that's how we have been raised. So the future of leadership, to me, means investing not in the current crop of leaders, but in the ones that are being birthed and are being raised and will ultimately get to a point where they are leaders themselves.
So, Linda, what is it we have to do more to develop future leaders, to encourage and empower future leaders?
We've got to be living out what leadership looks like. So right now, the average young leader thinks leadership looks like a Porsche and a house in the Blue Valley in Midrand, and it looks like things. And yet leadership is being. It's a way of, how do I carry myself? How do I interact with people? How do I treat the people who are more vulnerable than I am, whether in the workplace or whether in society? And once we start to live that out and play out being the leader that people would like to see, I think we will have started to put in the building blocks. So a lot of times, you know, our leadership is defined either by what we saw our bosses, our leaders do, whether it's good or bad, or it's defined by, I had such a horrible boss and I know exactly the kind of boss I don't want to be. So it's really creating the picture, the lived picture of leadership that's got humility, that's got empathy, that's got values, that sees, that hears, that cares. I think if we've got those in place, then the other things that we want to see in the bottom lines and so on will fall into place, because we would have created environments where people really are seeing what it looks like, and they're experiencing it, and they're wanting to live it themselves in their own capacity.
Now, Linda, these are challenging times as the world is stumbling from one crisis into the next. What is your advice for future leaders in terms of challenges? What are some of the biggest challenges they should expect to encounter and hopefully overcome in their career?
They can expect to encounter discrimination and biases. They can expect to encounter unethical practices. They can expect to encounter snakes in suits, for lack of a better word. And they're going to need to be very clear around what is their North Star, and lead from a perspective that does not compromise that North Star. So when they do encounter bias and discrimination, whether it's targeted at them, and usually when you're a leader, you're now in a position where it's no longer targeted at you, but it's targeted at other people and you can see it. The question becomes, when your peers are acting in a certain way that's not aligned to your values and your beliefs, what do you do about it? Do you call it out, or do you let it happen because it's not happening to you? So that's just one of the, when your peers are colluding to be able to help themselves to resources that they shouldn't be, what do you do? What do you do? Do you keep quiet and mind your own business? Do you become part of it, or do you call it out? So those are some of the challenges. And if you're not clear around what is your North Star, what is your core as a leader, you can find yourself being swayed. You can find yourself compromising, and you can find yourself stressed, because when there's that misalignment, that's where the unhappiness and the stress and and all these other negative emotions start to play themselves out. But if you can always be in a point that says, okay, North Star, where are you in this situation? And be true to that. I think you will have found at least one of the ways, in my experience, the biggest way to be able to recenter yourself and make decisions.
Thank you. And Linda, if you were to design a curriculum for future leaders, what are maybe one or two key skills you would want to factor in and maybe teach?
Oh, I would like to teach diversity. Well, I already teach on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
Because I think it's very important to be intentional about creating workplaces where people are truly heard and they feel heard and they feel valued. So it's one thing for me to say, oh, we value our people. But if the people who I'm saying we value don't feel valued, it's futile. So I would love to be to see more of that, but being lived, not being a buzzword that people don't experience in the workplace. I'd like to teach a curriculum that talks about empowerment, but not empowerment from, are you racially empowered? Are you empowered from a gender perspective? But that says, as a human being, are you an empowered person? I don't know what I would put into that curriculum, but I think when people are empowered, we get more out of them than when they are feeling I'm unheard, I'm disempowered, but when they know what empowerment looks like and how it's lived, I think we could do a lot more. So I would definitely be focusing on the softer skills, on the transformational skills that would get us the transactional results that we tend to prioritize over anything else.
Now, Linda, as a mentor to so many future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
Actually, one that comes to mind is I have a cousin that I was mentoring. She was studying to be a chartered accountant, and she kept failing the honors paper that would have then led her to write the board exams. And so she was getting frustrated and she was starting to doubt herself. Maybe I'm not smart enough and so on. And I recall one evening having a conversation with her around failure being a part of life. And what's important is what you learn out of it. And she then said to me, Sis Linda, are you trying to tell me that you've failed in your life before? And I said, yes, I did. Actually, I failed my honors paper quite interestingly. And because we don't talk about our failures as much as our successes are talked about, I think what I learned that day was to talk openly about my failures. So all she knew was that this is Linda, who's just been an A student all her life. She's gotten academic awards. Now she's a chartered accountant, and here I am failing. And it was that conversation, I think, that was served as a turning point in terms of helping her mentally realize that she had it in her to succeed and be a chartered accountant. And once we got that right, it was then about helping her understand that at this level, you know the theory. It's about how are you able to apply that theory, and helping her with the exam technique that would enable her to be successful. And we got it right, she and I. We got it right. She's a chartered accountant working in Namibia as a finance manager. But I think the important lesson that I got out of that was failure is a part of progress. So you don't give up because you failed. You go back to it and you ask yourself, how do I do it differently for us to get to where I want to get to?
Thank you. Now, Linda, looking back over your own leadership journey, are there any role models of leadership that you have encountered and maybe worked with that you would recommend future leaders should learn from?
Oh, yeah, I've had quite a few. But I think the one that I will speak about is Zunaid Bulbulia, Zunaid was my direct line manager when I was working for one of the biggest telcos in South Africa. And he literally took a chance on me because he took me when I was still very much an accountant, CFO roles, and helped move more into the operations / strategic space. And the things that I learned about him, humility, he remains one of the most humble people I have ever met in my life. I mean, he held a position that a decision he took could change the entire landscape of an industry at that point in time, but it didn't go to his head. He would walk into a room, Dr. Nick, and you tell him your name once, the next time he sees you, he will greet you by name. And that's a skill I'm yet to master, because when I'm sitting in a room and people are telling me their names, I'm stressing around, oh my goodness, am I going to remember your name? Am I going to remember? He would remember everybody's name. His title didn't define him. His being defined him. And that's what I learned from him, that your humility will take you far further than arrogance ever will. And he was very, very open about the fact that he surrounded himself with people who were much, much smarter than he was, because he knew that they would help him think things through. They would think differently from him. They would not say yes to everything. And as a result, the department would look good, not because of him as the leader, but the first team, referred to his first team that he worked with, that he empowered, that he respected. And he could sit in a room of his 6 direct reports and tell each one of us what he had learned from watching us, from working with us. So he definitely is top of the list of mentors, of role models that I have had over the years.
Now, Linda, how can our listeners connect with you, and where should they follow you?
They can follow me on X. I'm on Dr. Linda Nkomo on X. I'm still working on a website where, I can share a lot more of my life journey. I can share around how I summited Mount Kilimanjaro 2 years ago in 2022 and the lessons that I learned from that experience. Yeah, so that's where they can be able to connect with me. Although X is really like my personal space, so sometimes I post rubbish because I'm having a rant and I want to have a rant on X about how people are treating children and calling out the behaviors that have become normalized in our society.
Right. And last but not least, Linda, what is your message to the millions of kids out there who are looking to finish school, to start a career? What are maybe 1 or 2 success factors they should keep in mind?
Consistency matters more than speed. Don't do anything illegal. It will catch up with you. And if at first you don't succeed, keep trying until you succeed. And it's okay to change your mind. You guys are still young. You still have the benefit of years and years and years ahead of you. So don't rush into anything. To the young men, I always say, you know what? No means no. So if a girl does not want to be sexually involved with you, take that no. Don't destroy your life by raping a girl, a person. And to the young women, rape is not something to joke about. It has destroyed people's lives to lie about the fact that they've been raped. So let your word be your bond. Say what is real and don't destroy people's lives, because it does come back to bite you. But enjoy life. I also want to say, enjoy life. Make mistakes, change your mind, travel. Don't rush to settle down. You've got enough time to do all of that. And don't compromise on who you are. Don't allow anybody to dim the light of the unique human being that you are.
Linda, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership.
Once again, thank
And-
you once again, Dr. Nick, for reaching out to me. I really, truly appreciate this honor.
Thank you.